to Sarasota Audubon's December virtual meeting via webinar. Thanks for taking time out to join us tonight. I'm Karen Willey, and I'm your Zoom moderator tonight. And we'll start with a short business meeting led by Jean Dubie, our president, and then Margie Haas, our program director, will lead the presentation portion. So before we get started, I'll go over a few housekeeping items so you can participate. So this is a webinar and not a meeting. That's why we can't see you, but you can see us. We have tonight about 50 people attending, so it's a smaller group than we have had in the past. But we're happy to have you who are here. At any time during the webinar, you can submit your questions at the bottom, either to Q&A, and we will also be monitoring the chat box, so either one will work. And at the end of the program, we will ask your questions of the panelists. So that's it. So I will turn your attention now to our esteemed president, Jean Dubie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. We're going to have a very interesting program about the Tampa Bay Wildlife Refuges. My name's Jean Dubie, president, still president, you know, after all these years, still here. So I just want to give you a couple of updates. Our COVID update as it pertains to Audubon. At our last directors meeting on November the 19th, it was decided unanimously to continue with the Nature Center closing and suspension of all SAS activities. So we were hoping for some better news, but that's the way it is. As ever, our Nature Center gardens are open, and we have a lot of visitors there and a lot of workers there. They stick to the plan of mask wearing and social distancing, and that's proven to be a safe outlet for people to get out into nature and to help us in the gardens. And the gardens are looking fantastic, by the way. So really thank you for that. Our membership dues, your membership dues, I paid mine, have you paid yours? They are due by December. So a lot of you have sent in your membership dues, but please, for those of you who haven't, keep going, because we need every dollar we can get. As you know, this year we have no income from our sales in our nature center or from our events. So our membership dues are really important. And you can pay at sarasotaAudubon.org. It's easy enough, and click on membership, and off you go. I've got some really good financial news in spite of what I just said. As you know, we launched a Giving Tuesday fundraising campaign on December the 1st, and it extends through the giving season, by the way. So far, our marvelous members have donated and pledged over $43,000. Yay! That's really incredible. As you know, this is the time of year when most people make their donations, their year-end donations, so please keep them coming. And you can donate at sarasotaAudubon.org, or you can send a check into Audubon at 999 Center Road, Sarasota, Florida 34240. That particular fundraising campaign was geared for the quad. And as you know, we have to raise a considerable amount of money in order to restore the habitat in the quad. We don't have a bird recorder at the moment, but we do get plenty of information about birds in our area via eBird. All those birders go out and post their stuff onto eBird, and we find out what's around. And especially at this time of year, birders venture out to scout for the upcoming Christmas bird count on January the 2nd, which will be conducted, by the way. I'll tell you a little more about that in a minute. But unusual and rare birds have been spotted lately by our wonderful birders: ash-throated flycatcher, least flycatcher, scaly-breasted munia, blue grosbeak, cinnamon teal, and lots of other stuff. So There's a lot of action
Right,
out in
it's Surrey Fields too, right?
We feel that since most of the field work is done in a CBC by single people, pairs, or small groups, and we are encouraging mask and social distancing at the CBC, we feel comfortable that it can go on. This is the 121st year of nationwide Christmas bird counts. And Sarasota has been conducting CBCs since 1952. So 68 years of counting birds in Sarasota County. Stu Wilson is our coordinator. So if you do any backyard or neighborhood birding on January the 2nd, please send in your sightings to Stu Wilson at comcast.net. Or you can send them through the website to info@sarasotaudubon.org. You'll see that that's easily accessible, and we will get those sightings to Stu. And that's all I have to say at the moment. Keep safe, keep well. We'll see you in January, and really take care of yourselves over this, this holiday season. Okay. Back to Karen or back to Margie? I don't know.
Margie.
Margie.
Hello, everybody. I'm Margie Haas, and I'm thrilled to introduce our speakers for tonight, David Howard and Pat Mundus, who are co-founders of the Friends Group of the Tampa Bay's National Wildlife Refuges, protected places for our feathered friends. And they are both on the board. Actually, I understand that David and his wife, Barb Howard, who is behind him or next to him on this call, are co-founders of the Friends Group. There's Barb. Thank you, Barb. And David and his wife have grown this group from the beginning about 15 years ago. And Pat Mundus is also speaking with him, and he's vice president, board member, and volunteer and birder with a strong interest in habitat protection and restoration. So they both obviously have a really strong interest in habitat restoration and enjoy the outdoors. They work closely with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to maintain and improve our 3 local national wildlife refuges. So tonight we'll hear them talk about the history of the National Wildlife Refuges system and introduce our local refuges and the activities of their Friends Group, which are really our Friends Group, I'm sure. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Margie.
You're welcome.
Let me get that up. And has everybody seen the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, thank you, Sarasota Audubon, for having Patrick and I do some talking tonight. We're quite supportive of our 3 national wildlife refuges, and we want to share a lot of information about them. Starting with, oops, it's not moving forward. Starting with the history of where did this whole thing come from? Introduce you to the 3 National Wildlife Refuges here in Tampa Bay, and then finally talk about our Friends Group, who have a group of volunteers that spend time helping maintain these. A little history on wildlife preservation. It didn't really kick off federally till 1864, where Yosemite Valley was basically handed to California to take charge of, to protect it, because it was being just decimated by people going in there thinking they do whatever they want. 1869, the Pribilof Islands had the fur seals were almost completely gone when it was determined, let's make it a reserve, let's protect these fur seals. So that was a big movement in creating a reserve, which then the next big thing was, of course, Yellowstone being made a national park. And then in 1887, not many people have heard of this club, Boone and Crockett, but they were explorers, scientists, and political leaders. And they recognized that the buffalo were near being extinct. The plume hunters are destroying all our birds. And they started drafting up some ideas, which later years became the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, the Yellowstone Protection Act, and the National Wildlife Refuge System. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about. Of course, Teddy Roosevelt established the first National Wildlife Refuge, Pelican Island on the East Coast. Basically, 1903, number one. We'll talk about the third refuge in a minute. 1906, the Antiquities Act to preserve national monuments and things like the Grand Canyon from being destroyed. In 1918, officially the Migratory Bird Treaty Act I was mentioning, Migratory Bird Conservation Act in 1929. And finally, a big movement here was there's a Bureau of Biological Survey and a Bureau of Fisheries. They joined those two together to make a very strong fish and wildlife service. And that's basically grew into the group that we volunteer for. 1933, any refuge you go to in the country, you'll see this blue goose. It's our logo. And there's a frigate bird sitting on the sign at Indian Key, one of our National Wildlife Refuges here in Tampa Bay. Duck stamp is a big deal. 6 million acres have been bought and now are protected habitat, and 98 cents of every dollar is put towards purchasing land and maintaining land for wildlife. 568 refuges exist in the country and surrounding districts, 38 wetland districts, and 150,000 acres in total. Sorry, 150 million acres. That's why I have it here. A lot of people wonder what's the difference between parks and refuges. Parks are basically managed for people with huge visitation. Refuges are managed for wildlife. 46 million visitors per year. As you can see, a lot of species are using these wildlife refuges, 700 bird species, 220 mammal species, 250 reptiles and amphibian species, over 1,000 species of fish. But the important thing is that it protects over 250 endangered or threatened species. And they provide an area during migration for birds who fall out and get new nature or get their food and get their strength back up to continue their migration. So they're strategically located as well. Big picture, that's where they are all located in the country. You see Florida here has 29. The state of Florida has 29. So we have a lot of activity here. Going a little closer in, the red ones are part of the Crystal River Complex. Those 5 are all managed under one refuge leader. And here's the breakdown. Crystal River Complex, the 2 up north of us are about 90 miles from here. And then our 3, Pinellas, Egmont, and Passage Key, are right in our backyard. And the fact that the other 2 are 90 miles away, we have become the eyes and ears of what's going on down here. So our friends group is very active in keeping an eye on things. And now I'm going to have Patrick talk about specifically the Pinellas National Wildlife Refuge, one of the 3 here.
Okay, thanks, Dave. This is just a sort of a snapshot of all the refuges. Just to get you oriented there, you'll see the Skyway in the middle of the shot, St. Petersburg up at the top. And what we've got here is Egmont Key, Passage Key, which is a little bit below. And then the Pinellas Refuges are 7 islands with these orange bars underneath them. And I'm going to talk about those first. Those are all mangrove islands. Okay.
I'm almost there. Okay.
Okay. The Pinellas National Wildlife Refuges, the 7 mangrove islands, were designated in 1951 by Harry Truman, basically. They are outstanding Florida waters. We got about 400 acres roughly. And of course, nesting habitat for wading birds, herons, spoonbills, egrets, and other birds. And they are for wildlife only. They're closed to public access. So they are what we have left. And sometimes people say, well, what is so important about these little mangrove islands? Well, I think many of you know that, mangroves are really key to Florida. And this is a quote from The Gulf, the Jack Davis book, which I think should be mandatory reading for everybody who lives near the Gulf. Great book. And he talks about the importance of mangroves and all the just amazing things that they do and how critical they are to us, to our environment. Mangroves sequester an amazing amount of carbon. They function as, storm attenuation. They absorb a ton of energy. And most importantly, they are just a nursery for everything that lives in Tampa Bay and other bays. And these are of national significance. And if you zoom out a little bit and think about it, they don't have mangroves in California. We don't have mangroves in North Dakota. That is why our state, probably one of the most unique states, is so great, if you ask me. Go ahead, Dave. Next up. So as an example, really we've lost a lot of our mangrove and wetland habitat in Tampa Bay, at least, over 44%, probably over 50% now. And I like to just show an example of how that works, just visually. So you have two aerial photos here on the left, 1943, on the right, 2018. And this is Tierra Verde, which used to be Pine Key and Cabbage Key. And you can see our two little mangrove islands there of the National Wildlife Refuge, Little Bird and Jackass Key. And then on the right side, of course, you can see what it looks like today. So it just sort of hits home about, we don't have that much left. We really need to take care of it. Okay. So I'm going to start with Indian Key. I'm going to give you just a quick tour of really just the four big islands. Indian Key is right off of Eckerd College and Maximo Park in South St. Pete, really. It's about 90 acres. It has a little lagoon. It was designated in 1951. It has a lot of history. It has had several names in the past. Bird Key, Maximo Rookery, and I'm going to digress a little bit with the history here. Go ahead, Dave. There was an ornithologist, William Earl Dodge Scott, great name for one thing, and he was quite an adventure-bound guy. He was the curator and ornithologist at the University of Princeton, and he came down on a sailboat and sailed the Gulf Coast in the 1880s, early 1880s, 1881. And as he sailed into Tampa Bay and went to really what is today Indian Key, this is what he said. He's never seen anything like that together at any single point. And they estimated on Indian, there were 100,000 birds of 25 different species. Then, next slide, Dave. Well, that was about the time the plume trade began. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the plume trade. You probably know much about it. But what I will say is in the 1880s, 1890s, plumes became more expensive than gold per ounce. So it was a fairly lucrative business if you were into it. Okay. So what happened and what put Indian Key on in the history books really was that Scott came back in 1886, and what he found at Indian Key was that there were no birds, zero birds. It had been completely decimated by Alfred Le Chevalier. That's pronounced incorrectly, and he was a homesteader who lived in South St. Pete, and he was a plume hunter and an egg collector. And it took he and his crew about 5 years to clean out Indian, and then they actually moved down south into the 10,000 Islands area and kind of continued to do that. But you can see in the map there, it's an 1879 map, the sort of distinctive shape of the key that remains today. So that was, our sort of textbook example of what happened in the plume trade. Okay. And this is another little sidelight, but 2 years ago, there was a history of conservation exhibit at the Tampa History Museum that Ann Paul helped put together. And I put this in there because these are two birds, two skins that Dodge collected in the 1880s. I mean, that's kind of how you did it back then. He was collecting for a museum. And it's just interesting to me that she was able to get those and put those on display and just sort of understand how it worked in 1880. Okay. So Indian Key today is used by many species of birds. The list here is what you see. Lots of birds use that species. The birds in blue have nested or the birds listed in blue have nested on Indian Key. In the past, we have in the 1880s, at the time that Scott was there, it was probably the largest reddish egret colony in the world. It took until 2015 to get reddish egrets to re-nest on Indian Key, which they did. Unfortunately, we haven't had any nesting there since, I believe, 2015, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Go ahead, Dave. So no nesting since 2016. It's still heavily used, for roosting and feeding and everything else you can imagine. But the problem has been on Indian Key has been predation by rats and raccoons. And we can gladly say that we think last year Indian Key was free of rats. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife has a trapping program that they've implement every year. It's ongoing. We'll never be able to stop it. We'll have to keep doing this as part of management. And we've made a lot of progress, and hopefully we'll have nesting birds out at Indian fairly soon. Little Bird Key, one of my favorite little mangrove islands, very small, less than an acre, but just a consistent nesting island. The birds in blue again are what we've had nesting out there. We've had a couple good years in a row. We're not sure why this island is so successful, but we are very glad that it is. You can go to the next slide, Dave. Just some pictures that we're taking out there. We visit these islands once a month to see what's going on and count birds. So we get a lot of pictures. Green herons, spoonbills. We had a spoonbill nest last year, which was great. And as with anything, management is required. And as I mentioned before, we're trying to take care of these tiny mangrove islands. I just think if we can't take care of these, what can we take care of? So we finished a project last year at Little Bird Key, which was being eroded by sort of ongoing boat wakes from recreational boaters. And if you go to the next slide, you can see in that upper left picture, everybody's staring at a little mound of oysters on the ground. Well, that was a sign that used to be in the mangroves. So you can see how much is eroded. So we installed it, partnering with Tampa Bay Watch, about 500 concrete reef balls and what they do is absorb that wave energy, and then sediment will build up behind those and allow the mangroves to hopefully creep back out to where they are or were. We are monitoring that pretty carefully, and after a year, it's looking good. We think they're really doing their job. Boat wakes can do a lot of damage. It doesn't seem like it, but they do. So we were really happy to see that project come in, and it didn't seem to impact the nesting on the island at all in terms of loss of nesting. We did fine last year. Jackass Key is just a little bit further along Tierra Verde. If you're taking the road out to Fort DeSoto, you would look off to your left and maybe catch a glimpse of it. It's a little bigger. It's known for its frigate bird roosting. It's one of my favorite places to take people that visit on a little kayak tour. We get mostly juveniles and males, pretty much year round. The numbers go up and down. They don't nest here. They nest further south. They are just fantastic to watch. They have the lowest wing load, I think, of any bird. And I think they're just a fascinating creature all in all. Okay. And you can easily find 200 out there sitting, you know, roosting in the mangroves. Up to 1,000 have been counted. I think Eric Plage from Tampa Bay Watch found 1,000 there a couple months ago. It's just it's truly amazing, and we're glad they continue to use it. And they're not the only birds that use that island. It's pretty well used by cormorants, all the waders. So it's a good resource. Tarpon, if you're driving north over the Skyway and you look to your left, to the west, you'll see a fairly sizable mangrove island with some palm trees sticking up on it. I know everybody has seen it. That's Tarpon Key. It's part of the Pinellas National Wildlife Refuge. It's our largest island. It has an interior lagoon. It's just a really beautiful place. It has some little beaches along the edge. It also has our most diverse group of birds that use it and have been counted on that island. Again, the birds in blue are the birds that have nested there. We have not had nesting on tarpon since 2002 or 2003. Again, it's a predation problem that is continually being worked on. Tarpon was a large, very large brown pelican nesting colony, even in the 1990s. We think that colony or those birds sort of have moved out to Egmont Key or vicinity. That colony, it coincides with the growth of Egmont nesting. So we think that they have probably moved out there, and Dave will talk a little more about that. Just some photos, brown pelicans, 1990, we had 345 pairs. Now we don't have any. Hopefully next year. One of the most notable things about tarpon is the white pelicans that winter in the bay every winter. They really like I guess it's sort of the northwest side of it. There is a fairly long beach, and that picture at the bottom there shows, I think, about 1,000 of them just resting. And so that is it's just quite a sight. I don't know what else to say about it. And I wouldn't say you'd commonly find 1,000, but finding a few hundred is not uncommon. Tarpon also has some dry land on it. All of these 7 islands have a little bit of dry land on it, but tarpon has, I'm going to say around 1 acre of dry land. And you get the diamondback terrapin. There's oyster catchers visit, and we get prairie warbler nesting on most of these mangrove islands. So that's always a sort of a summer treat. And now back to Mr. Howard.
Okay, great job, Pat. Going to go to Egmont Key now. And as you see, the red area of Egmont Key is closed to the public. The reason for that is the large population of birds that nest in that area. I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail. Became a National Wildlife Refuge in 1974. It's also a National Register of Historical Places, 1978. Interesting, it became co-managed. It's owned by Fish and Wildlife, but it became co-managed with the Florida State Park, so that we have a nice agreement there that two groups are managing this very delicate island, and I'll talk more about that. Located in Hillsborough County, we're the last ones that Pat talked about in Pinellas County. We have all the counties covered here. Volunteer support is our friends group that's presenting tonight, and plus Egmont Key Alliance, which is another volunteer group that's very active in maintaining that island. I'm not going to go over detail here, but in 1529, when it was first surveyed at over 535 acres. During the three Seminole Indian Wars, it was used as a place to house prisoners, the Indians. Part of the Trail of Tears. There was a lighthouse built in 1847 that was destroyed in 1847, not built very strong. In 1858, they built the one to withstand any storm. If you go out there today, that lighthouse is still standing. During the Civil War, the Union maintained control. During the Spanish-American War is what you find many of the relics out there on the island now. It was Fort Dade. It was 5 gun batteries, 300 soldiers occupied that island with 70 buildings, and they were all basically, most of them were made out of wood. And you know, Florida and termites and storms, those buildings are mostly gone. The world wars, both world wars, the islands were used for bombing, and there was a firing range. And on World War II or World War I, they had an actual aircraft landing field out there. Oh, sorry. The guns on Egmont had a 7-mile range, and when the ironclad ships showed up with their 8 to 10 to 12-mile range, Fort Dade was decommissioned. That was the end of that. Designated National Wildlife Refuge in 1974, and once again, National Register of Historic Places and co-managed by Florida State Park. Here's the second lighthouse. The first one didn't last long enough to take a picture. But obviously that was the keeper's house, which is long gone, made out of wood. On the left was a kerosene lantern on top that would rotate. On the right is current look. It has an LED light that just simply flashes on and flashes off. So for last 162 years, it has withstood any and all our storms. Many species are reported through eBird to visit or habitat Egmont Key, 180 species, 28 of them being warbler species. Very beautiful to go out there during the counts and find many of these. Here's a picture that I had to show you. This is sandwich terns and royal terns all getting along very well. This is at the south end of Egmont Key, which is close to the public. The biggest population is laughing gulls, typically about 25,000 pairs on the island. Royal terns, approximately 7,500 pairs, and sandwich terns, about 2,500 pairs during their peak nesting season. Other birds certainly are significant. The white ibis in the trees, same with brown pelicans. Just a side note that the brown pelican, when we had a fire on Egmont Key, they do burns, but when we had a fire on Egmont Key, we found the white pelicans were losing some of their nesting trees. They ended up nesting on the ground, and when they did, the chicks, instead of sitting waiting for mom and dad to bring them food, they would wander down to the rack line and take care of gathering their own food. It was pretty neat to see. Black skimmers, I think we had 75 pairs last year on the north end. Ospreys, I think 8 to 10 pair, and several other types of birds. But you can see the Egmont Key, I think the highest we've ever had was 48,000 pairs of birds nesting on the south end of Egmont Key. A few of them here. Skimmers, oyster catchers, and the sky is full of them during nesting season. Mom and dad running back and forth catching fish, bringing them in for their kids. By the numbers here in 1990, literally no nesting on Egmont Key. I'll explain why in a minute. As it grew, it became more apparent that this was something that was going to be a significant value to the Tampa Bay area. 2015 was the highlight. It has decreased recently, a lot of it from storms and such. Why did it grow so fast? We have law enforcement going out there routinely. and making sure people are not in the closed area, keeping the dogs out. They have signs now prohibiting pets on the entire island. What you see in the picture there is our bird stewards. So on weekends and holidays, we station a tent by the east end and another one by the west end, entering the bird sanctuary. And we basically don't arrest anybody or yell at anybody. We are there to educate folks. We do outreach. We bring binoculars and let them look down the beach and see why they shouldn't go down there. Another reason for the increase is the recession of Passage Key. In 2007, Passage Key completely disappeared. It was a submerged sandbar from the storms and high tides and basically sea level rise. Sea turtle nests, loggerheads. Egmont Key is an index nesting beach site, which is saying a lot about their beaches out at Egmont. We had a low turnout this last year. Basically, the timing was terrible. The storms came in, washed over so many of the nests, but we still had over 3,000 hatchlings produced that year. Typically 30 to 70, so you see a marked increase in nesting out there. We have a population of gopher tortoises, hundreds of them. You see in the right-hand picture, we're going to have more. People management is the challenge. The good news is it is remote for the wildlife, but it's still a lot of visitation. And I think the last number I heard was over 160,000 visitors a year to an island that you can only get by ferry or by boat. Managing the habitat is really tough because of the storms, because of sea level rise. We've lost so much of the island. The weather keeps us from going out and doing some of our jobs, volunteer work, and the recession is apparent. And I'll talk more about that. That's a picture of us helping put buoys out to make sure people know that that's a closed area. Here's a remarkable picture. This is about recession. This is about storms hitting this island. There used to be, you can see what the palm trees are just falling over from this. 1940, before 1940, what I want to point out here, this was all the gun batteries. If you can see my mouse go up and down, these were the gun batteries. All this land to the right is now gone. Here's the gun batteries. Yeah. And this was the landing field I was talking about. That's submerged and gone. So this island's gone through a major change. The 70 buildings, there's only a few buildings left. The lighthouse survived, but everything else is pretty much gone. The gun batteries are the cement remnants of the foundation, still there, but the guns themselves. 2 of the gun batteries are actually out in the Gulf now. They used to be in the middle of the island, and now they're in the Gulf. So habitat is a great concern for us with such a perfect beach for turtles and such a perfect safety harbor for the birds to nest, to be seeing this kind of erosion. You can imagine being a sea turtle trying to come up the beach and lay an egg and run into that wall of sand. We started a group called Save Egmont Key. It was an initiative to look into what can we do to stabilize Egmont Key, not maybe make it 535 acres again, but at least stabilize it so we don't lose more. We've even had the Corps come in and investigate what options. They came up with 11 different scenarios that would help stabilize it, but it requires significant funding, and we haven't figured out how to get that funding yet. We've even presented this to several congressmen, what's going on out there, and they just don't have the power to make much happen. So all we can do right now is get the Corps of Engineers, instead of taking the dredge from the shipping channel, which they used to take it offshore and just dump it, now they take it to Egmont and dump it onto the island. So we do have some hope that we can stabilize it, but what we've seen in the past is we are losing more than we are gaining in the renourishment. The way to get out there is the safest way is with Tampa Bay Ferry. It leaves Fort DeSoto at the Gulf Pier. They're closed right now, but I think when COVID gets over, They're open for COVID. I think they're closed. Oh, the boat's in dry dock. That's right. But call them if you plan to go there. They take you out for 3-4 hours. You can walk the beach and look at the old town and enjoy beautiful, beautiful beach. I'm going to shift gears to Passage Key. You can see it's getting closer to Sarasota, not there yet, but it's in Manatee County. And this is a picture from 1905 when it was established as shortly after it was established a National Wildlife Refuge. It's a rendition. It was about 60 acres. At one time, they thought it was a 35-acre freshwater lake on the island, and they actually had a refuge manager living on the island. Here it is in 2018. The dark area that you see there is actually plants growth, but you can see the shape is very small, very old, about 8 acres at most. Designated a wilderness area, which means it's closed to the public. Once the largest royal tern colony in Florida, when Teddy Roosevelt was taking care of the Rough Riders and they were going to Cuba in the 1898 era, they cruised by this little island and it looked like it had snowed on the island. And Teddy remembered that. And when he became president, he made this a National Wildlife Refuge because of that. So the timing was everything. 1990, you can see there was 2,600 royal terns nesting on there. The largest royal tern nesting colony. Of course, after it's submerged and slowly coming back, it's not a colony of terns now at all. This is what it looks like today. They did have a pair of oyster catchers. We saw the hatched eggs. That's why we knew they had nested there. But like I said, we don't get down there too often. People are not supposed to be on this island. It's closed to the public. But you can see in this next slide, people kind of go on the island, enjoy the island, but it doesn't give them much of a chance for the little pair of oyster catchers right there. Oop. Cannot go on that island. I think the ticket's $200. It's about a $200 ticket if Fish and Wildlife catches you on that island. I showed this slide. This back in 2015. As the sands shift, things show up. And in this case, it was an old World War II bomb that was a practice bomb, but they didn't know if it was live or not. So Tampa Fire and Rescue came out and they actually exploded it. And I put this slide in not because of that, but because look at all the birds that are utilizing this little island. Talking about the Friends group now, we've been around since 2005. My wife Barb and I formed this with a cooperating agreement with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We basically follow their mission, which is our mission, promote conservation awareness and appreciation of the refuge complex, and provide assistance to the mission and programs of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We're a 501c3 not-for-profit organization with 264, give or take, members. Things that we do. This is our bird stewards program. Like I said earlier, that we basically outreach to folks that think they can go down into the closed area. We do cleanups, enormous amount of trash that these islands filter out. Stuff coming out of Tampa Bay seem to be gathered up by these islands. So we're constantly taking out the trash. We do monthly bird counts, as Pat mentioned. Every month we go out by boat and kayak, and we measure and count every bird that's on all 7 of these mangrove islands. We always are on the hunt for fishing line. It's Ann Paul in the middle who gathered up quite a find. Disheartening to see this sort of loss. And sometimes a rescue is necessary. So while we're out doing the count, we'll stop everything if we see somebody tangled up and go help them. Sometimes we are able to, we have some good groups out there that come by and pick up the bird after we capture it, so we can continue on with our count. Sometimes we brought a few of the birds back with us. Another thing we do is we supply docents in the guardhouse through Egmont Key Alliance and the Friends Group. We have volunteers that go out there on weekends and holidays. We open the guardhouse and there's this wildlife displays inside, along with a lot of information about the history of this beautiful island. We have outreach for youth education. Here's a valuable picture of just the kids getting into wildlife, which we need more of. We do projects. We have built 5 of these kiosks, quite a challenge, but we get them done. A couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago, we had a kayak, actually an ancient kayak, wash up on the beach. And the bottom picture shows us building a tub to put the submerged kayak in to keep it in one piece until we could ship it off to be restored. What was it? State. Yeah, the state is going to restore that for us. We do sign installations, buoy installations. We have corporations that come out and help. One is Duke Energy. After hurricane last year, had all the trails were packed full of branches and you couldn't even pass through them. They came out and we took, I couldn't tell you how many trailer full of trash to the burn pile. There is a cabin out there that Fish and Wildlife uses. We maintain that. We have finally another sign installation. It's a team effort. We do field trips everywhere from Everglades all the way up to Okefenokee. We've taken trips to wildlife refuges and sanctuaries. Here's Ann Paul in the bottom. This is our annual bird sanctuary tour to Egmont. You can see the number of birds just in that one picture. When I mentioned over 100,000 birds on that beach during nesting season. Last year it was in demand. We always have a waiting list. We can only take 47 people. Last year it was so popular. We had talked to Hubbard's and they ran the tour twice. We filled the boat twice. So if you think about it, keep an eye on Friends of Tampa Bay, just Google that, and we will have another one this year, providing we can take care of COVID a little better, or next year, but it is beautiful. All you can hear is a click of cameras. It's a great opportunity to get up close. We don't go on the beach, but we certainly are close enough for some very great pictures. A couple things we do for outreach is ale and wild tales. I know this is up in St. Pete. It's not around your backyard, but we do have guest speakers once a month. Second Wednesday of each month, downtown St. Pete. There's a what's the name of it? Ale and the Witch is the name of the bar, and they have all the craft beers there, so we get a good turnout. I want to thank now the Friends photographers and others who provided the pictures for this, and the thanks to the many partners that we have. Egmont Key Alliance, I mentioned, Hubbard's, who takes the ferry out. They give our volunteers a ride out there, and Fish and Wildlife and the Florida Service. And I am open to questions. And Pat and I are happy to answer what we can.
Thank you very much. It's very provocative. Karen, do you?
Yeah, there's 2 questions in the Q&A.
All right.
So Vicky French asks, has the rat population increased over past numbers? And if so, why?
The rat situation mostly is on Indian Key. It is within earshot of Eckerd College. And Eckerd College has a tremendous issue with rats. I don't see it ever going completely away, because those rats can smell the chicks in there and they're going to be on their way over. Real quick on Egmont Key, it was a disaster. We had a beach renourishment done maybe 7 years ago. And unfortunately, the boats that they used were out of Louisiana, and they had the Louisiana fruit rats on it. And those rats stuck their nose up in the air and they made their way to Egmont Key. so quickly. It was just before nesting season, and we were so afraid. So what we did is we purchased 300 snap traps. We mounted them on pieces of wood and went down to the nesting area, and we set these all up. And the first night, 170 fewer rats were on that island. We went to a better place.
You know, a related question, rats can swim? That's a question.
Yes, yes, they can. If they're
They can.
hungry and they have the smell, they're on their way.
Oh, boy.
Can I just make a comment on the rat situation?
Yes, please.
Our current refuge manager has really worked hard in the last few years to just keep being very consistent about trapping, which is what you need to do. And I think even once you get it down to 0, it's going to take a few years for birds to come back and nest. But we're doing much better.
All right, we have another question. William Mize asks, is there a known reason for erosion on Egmont Key?
Storms, sea level rise, and the large, I'll say that off the top of my head, without proof, boat wakes. So, you know, the bigger the boat, the bigger the wake. And we have been getting bigger boats coming through that channel on their way to Tampa.
It's complex and controversial,
Yes.
but I will say we've lost so much of Egmont on the Gulf side. We have gained a little on the Bay side, but not nearly 1-to-1. I mean, so it's a shifting island and it's shifting the wrong way for us right now.
And we've witnessed 8 inches of, or 7 inches of sea level rise since 1950s.
Yeah. The most recent storm had overwashed the island, tore a whole bunch of sand off of the Gulf side, and just created havoc. It damaged the dock that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife uses. So it's very challenging to manage islands. I've come to find out in my short time trying that. Everything costs twice as much, takes twice as long, and you have twice as many weather days. I mean, but it's fun.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Right now, I guess, because of the virus, people who would like to try to visit any of these islands under the proper auspices, they're all shut down for now. Is that true?
Pinellas Refuge islands are shut down all the time. There's the 7 that Pat talked about. Egmont Key, there is visitation on Egmont Key in the areas that are not closed to wildlife, but you have to practice social distancing. The island is not closed to the public in that area.
Take that Hubbard's Ferry.
Hubbard's Ferry is taking people out, but they're taking it half a boatload instead of a full boatload, and they're having people spread apart.
So the mangrove islands are closed to landing, but you are free to kayak or boat with a trolling motor around them. So that's one way they can be visited, and the Egmont Key ferry is running. The guardhouse, our education center, has been closed since the beginning of COVID, and we don't know when that will be opened again, but hopefully eventually.
This isn't about birds, but I noticed that Tarpon Key is on Whale Island. Do you ever see whales out there? I see dolphin off the Gulf here in Siesta Key, but I'm wondering.
We don't find any jackasses on Jackass Key. So I don't know where these things came from.
I think Whale Island, which is the little mark next to Tarpon, in someone's eyes, it looked like a whale breach. Something like that.
I must say it's a provocative title for an island.
We don't know why.
So we did get a follow-up question to the, when you were talking about overwash. How low is Egmont Key? Do you know the elevation?
No.
Oh, it's super low. It's like 2.
Two,
I don't know.
Wow.
2 feet. Yeah.
Well, the one
What do you
picture
think,
depends
Dave?
on- Yeah, it depends on where you are on the island. That one picture I showed you with that was a 6-foot escarpment. I have another picture of actually one of our volunteers standing next to that eroded area, and he was the same height as that.
Wow.
Wow. That's a good question.
I should clarify that though. The entire island did not overwash. That mostly happens in the south section, would you say, Dave?
Yes.
Yeah. The
And then
Tampa Bay Pilots Association has a compound there, and they have had that for 100 years. They go and meet every ship coming into Tampa Bay and guide it in and out. They happen to be in one of the lower areas, and they had, I don't know, 30 inches of water in their entire compound.
So if you can see my mouse, it's in this area right here is what Pat's talking about. And this is the lowest part on the island. And our biggest concern is a big storm. We're not Cat 1, but maybe a Cat 3 could split this island right in half. It would be right through there, just to the left of the E.
There is a notch there, isn't there?
Yeah.
A
a
cut
little
in.
bit.
Wow.
So Frank Blum asked, have they ever tried to put artificial reefs to help lessen the impact of the storms?
That was one of the Army Corps of Engineers came up with that idea as one of their 11 thoughts is to put WADs, wave attenuating devices
Okay.
along the shoreline of Egmont Key. And I don't know if you realize that the boaters love Egmont Key. And if we were to put those structures up there, we would raise, holy heck, it would be really tough to get public support to do that. Plus, we have loggerhead sea turtles that have to work their way into the beach, and we don't want any problems there.
Yeah. Wow.
That's a great question, though. We've looked
There
at
any-
one of the 11.
Any more questions?
That's it.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Oh.
Karen. Gentlemen, thank you so
Oh,
much
Mark.
for all that you're doing. And thank you so much for making us much more aware of the fine work you're doing and the fine work we all need to do. If nothing else, I know a lot of people are requesting donations right now, but I'm sure any monies that anybody has enough of, please send your way. You're doing great work and it's very important.
Thank you, Margie.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Thank you. It was wonderful, really eye-opening, really eye-opening.
Totally. Thank you again.
You're welcome. I'll stop sharing.
Think so. Good night, everybody.
Oh,
Bye.
and next month,
Next month, it will be, Karen, do you want to describe? Karen will be one of our speakers next month.
yes, Tim Rummage from Ringling College. He's an expert in climate change. He's going to talk about the science of climate change, and I'm going to end with how to talk about it. So we're going to
Okay, so
do
putting
it
on.
next month. Yeah.
Happy
Very
holidays.
good.
to all
Thank
of
you again, everybody.
Yes.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Good night.
All right. Stop.
Great job. Well done, Karen, for doing that.